Richard Goffman.
Hello, hello. So, Dr. Gabriella Hearn, close enough? Okay, is a licensed clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist with a special interest in the effects of cancer and its treatment on cognitive and emotional functioning. She developed the Chemo Brain Workshop program at Mount Sinai downtown Union Square and often speaks about brain health to groups such as Gilda's Club, Cancer Care, and the American Cancer Society. She has taught graduate classes in neuropsychology, neuropsychological assessment, psychopharmacology, and learning disabilities. Dr. Hearn received her PhD in clinical psychology at Columbia University Teachers College and completed postdoctoral training at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey Medical School. I met Gabriella in Tai Chi class.
Okay, thank you. Hello. Is the sound working? Oh, good. I will move this over here. Yes, I know Richard from Tai Chi Qigong class. Actually, we do two things in there. And that's actually some of what we're going to be talking about today is why that's so great that we're doing it. I'm also thrilled to hear about piano lessons for children, walking and talking with friends. These are all things that I'm very excited about in terms of brain health and what we can do to stay cognitively healthy and fit. I was thinking about this morning, and after listening to the news, and the whole world just seems to be in flames. And it's easy for a thinking person to feel completely overwhelmed, I think, right now. And if you're not, you're probably not paying attention. So it's really hard to know what to pay attention to, honestly. There's hurricanes. We just had someone talking about the hurricanes in Florida, disasters, climate change, political events. The list is endless. And even news about health and well-being can get lost in all the noise. And the information seems to conflict. Red wine is good for you, eggs are bad. Or is it the other way around? Depends on the year. I don't know. So it gets a bit crazy. However, even with all the misinformation and what seems like conflicting information, there is actually good news. I wanted to say that again. There is actually good news about health, well-being, and our brains. So, just in the past few years, there have been some amazing breakthroughs, new recommendations about how we can increase our lifespan, but maybe more importantly, our health span. That's the new buzzword, is our health span. How can we increase not only our life, but the life in our years, and make it that we want to be around and enjoy, being with our friends and family. So in times like this, it's good to have our wits about us. So let's talk about some ways we can take care of our brains, and so we can deal productively with the world as it is and what's going on in it. And the great news is that the recommendations that we're going to talk about are simple. They're mostly free or low cost, and anyone can do them. So let's kind of dive in and see where we go. Please feel free to, I could put my glasses on. Please feel free to ask questions, or if what I'm saying doesn't make any sense. I'm quite happy with a Socratic dialogue here. So we're going to talk about four main topics today. Nutrition, an oldie but goodie, exercise, including Tai Chi and Qigong, mental engagement, and social engagement. So we do have some handouts from the one of the neuropsychological associations. You can have them. They're going to cover or sort of summarize a lot of what we're talking about, but I'm taking the four things that I'm really interested in right now: kind of my burning issues in terms of what's good for us and brain health. So nutrition, an oldie but goodie. Everyone knows about nutrition. We all know about the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, the MIND diet. I even heard about the portfolio diet the other day. Whatever. I mean, it's all crazy. You can look them up. I'm happy to talk about them. But the bottom line is fruits, vegetables, protein, mostly non-meat protein if you can, healthy fats, not so much sugar, unfortunately, not too much fried food, not too much saturated fats, and just sort of eating sort of a natural, healthy diet. So that's not news. That's been around forever. It's hard to do. I mean, every time I personally try and do it, I realize I'm not doing it that well, but we'll do what we can. And you still have to live your life and enjoy it. What I found fascinating was a study came out in January this year. I might move around a bit. In actually 2024, it was an NIH study about multivitamins and how one daily multivitamin, in this case Centrum Silver, because they supplied them for free, so that's why they got the name there. But the study group took one daily multivitamin for 2 years with a placebo-controlled trial, and the group that took had the multivitamins actually showed a significant delay in cognitive decline of 2 years compared to the group. They did not decline the same that the non-control group did. So people who did not take that multivitamin with everything in it showed basically a 2-year increase in brain age over the group who took daily multivitamins. And again, is it only Centrum Silver? I don't know. But they're the ones that they did the study with. And Centrum Silver has been doing very good sales since then, I can tell you. So again, simple. Most of us probably even do that already. Again, there was, equivocal information. Should you even bother with vitamins? Is it a waste of time and money? But this study was, I think, one of the first to show that, yes, it actually makes a difference, and it was a significant difference. I mean, 2 years of mental health in the brain is a lot of time. So easy peasy, anyone can do it, and it's something we can do right away. So, and I began with saying, red wine, good or bad? Bad, sorry. For years and years, they said, a little bit is good, the resveratrol, all this kind of stuff. And it was just really, really sad day when WHO and CDC and every American Medical Association and pretty much everybody has said, let's just get real. It is a neurotoxin. It really doesn't do anything for our hearts that we don't already do with exercise and everything else. If you do enjoy it, enjoy in extreme moderation, because it does kill brain cells. And I'm just so sad to say that today, but it's the truth. So in terms of our diet, again, small tweaks. Again, we make choices. Some people might say that's not one worth getting rid of, and I'd say that, go for it. Because pleasure and joy are actually really important when we talk about health and well-being. And I'll talk more about that in social engagement. But, a life of deprivation and trying to do everything right at the exclusion of joy, may wonder why you're doing it. So just information, some of it not so great, but please, do with it what you will.
Yeah, just one thing that my husband found out in the last 6 months or so is the idea that everybody should have 30 grams of protein at each meal, and that it doesn't help to have 90 grams in a steak at night, that you have to kind of space it out, which is generally fine in lunch and dinner, but breakfast can be kind of tough. And what he's gotten is protein powder that you can order. And so in the morning I mix it up with yogurt. He mixes it up with milk for his cereal, and that way we can spread it out. But I'd never really heard about the idea of 30 grams per meal until this year.
Yeah, the great question. That's actually the new thing too. A protein, protein. Especially as we get older, we need more protein for muscle development, and basically the 90 grams of protein a day. What's controversial about it is it's actually at least double the recommended daily allowance that the U.S. government has proposed. But it's the minimum daily requirement. So 90 is absolutely perfect. It's right in the ballpark of what we should all be taking. Hmm? Yeah, a day. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't misspeak. So yeah, I think the minimum when you look at the requirements are. Yeah, so 16 is about half then of the 30. So you could actually double it and be in good shape. In terms of like what you can do for protein, there are things like flaxseed and chia seeds and all these kind of health food supplements are available even at ShopRite. And you can sort of add those to meals as well, and things like Greek yogurt and foods like that. But yeah, protein is absolutely essential for brain and body.
How about lion's mane mushroom?
I'm hearing a lot of good things about that, actually, including from my brother in Australia. So it's certainly a widespread. I don't know personally enough about it to say anything useful, but I have heard very good things about it.
What kind of mushrooms?
Lion's mane mushroom.
It's
Yeah.
actually
A lot
beautiful.
of people are not familiar with it.
Yeah.
And Mike Bush tried it and didn't get anything from it. Right. Remember the lion's mane mushroom? The mushroom powder thing?
Oh.
Yeah. It works for me.
It's got some good reviews. Like I said, I don't know enough about it, but I do know it's been talked about, and it's great if you're getting good results.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've got a mic now. I go and I check the choices for a trail mix
Uh-huh.
that has most of what I think you're going to say is important. Flaxseed is a big deal because evidently it's cheaper. It's more of that than anything else. But fruit, and of course, is in it too.
Right. You got to just be careful of the little chocolate pieces, though. Good. So, yeah, and just obviously food is meant to be fun. It's, a source of pleasure. But when it's also great for us and you can feel like you're doing something good, throughout the day, it's such an easy intervention. And, food as medicine has been around as a concept, probably for thousands of years. So I'm glad we're all on the same page. So exercise, we're going to talk a little bit about. If anyone was around during the 80s with the aerobic.
I just have a quick
Yeah.
question. Is dark chocolate, I'm diabetic, is dark chocolate, I like dark anyway. A small amount shouldn't be that bad for the diet, right? If you
No, it's not. It's actually still on the list of good things. Especially the very dark chocolate. I think it's flavonoids. And has less sugar. Obviously, sugar has really become the culprit again. For a long time, really it was fat. High fat, everything had to be low fat this, low fat that. And, the thinking in the field now has changed to really sugar, as delicious and enticing as it is really very addictive and has, some very neurotoxic effects actually as well. It sounds like you're on the right track with that. Yeah, but dark chocolate is still a nice reward as well. So the 80s with the whole aerobic. Oh, question I see.
I just wanted to go back a second, just back to the wine.
I know it's. I'm sorry.
And you have to look at more than just the chemistry of what is in it, and don't just think vitamins are the only benefit, because one of the things about wine is that it is a social lubricant, and there's almost nothing better for your longevity than social intercourse. And so
Yes.
if you cut wine out and then all of a sudden it's not working for you, you might want to put that back in.
I'd say keep an open mind with everything. And we will talk about social engagement, and obviously social lubricants are very useful, especially I think a lot of us, I'll speak for myself, after, 4 years of COVID and working remotely. I mean, this is the first group I've spoken to in 4 or 5 years, to be honest. And I used to, oh, hey! Thank you. So thanks for having me, because I'm a little rusty. But, you know, I could feel my social skills just meeting people and doing things in groups for the first time. It was not only a little nerve-wracking because, you know, we're still all getting used to, you know, the whole germ concept, but just interacting with people in a group. I mean, it just felt very strange and very foreign, especially for an extrovert. It was very upsetting. But to get to your point about, you know, wine and chocolate and, you know, trail mix, I mean, again, we all have to make decisions. And I think when you just know what you're dealing with and what the options are, and then you can make informed decisions. And yes, you know, for many people, you know, a glass of wine is a social event, it's a cultural event, it's, you know, very, very meaningful. For others, it may not be as useful. So I think it's just knowing of all the array of options out there, you know, what you can choose to make your life better and joyful and worth living a long time for. And coffee is actually still good. It had a bad rap for a while, and now coffee's back again. And tea, and the green teas, and the black teas, and, you know, all of that for sort of actually protective factors for the brain and attention and concentration. I mean, some people obviously are lactose intolerant, and, you know, the fat issue can come in for some people. But again, you know, my grandfather, who lived to 96, said, you know, everything in moderation, you know, and anything that we overdo tends to kind of circle back and kind of get to us. But again, it's moderation, it's choosing what makes life pleasurable, and just sort of living for enjoyment as well. And, you know, speaking of exercise, I remember being at a conference pre-COVID, actually on sort of chemo brain and cognitive health with cancer. And the takeaways from that conference were universally that exercise was the most helpful, brain protective, cheap intervention. Forget medication, forget all these brain training programs and luminosity, all these things that we were talking about at this conference. They said exercise is everything. I kept saying there must be one study that says, you know, you don't really need to exercise that much. They have not come up with that study yet, much to my dismay, because I'm actually quite lazy. So, and that was the study where all the physical therapists were there, and the psychologists and everybody, and all the physical therapists were saying, you know, sitting is the new smoking. And that was like, oh, the first time I'd heard that, and I was like, oh, well, that's really upsetting. So, you know, since then it's just become more and more adamant, you know, about this, that, you know, movement is so important. And again, you know, the ones like the exercise thing that started in the I guess it was the 80s, wasn't it? Jane Fonda and the aerobics and leg warmers and all of that. And that still holds true. You know, aerobics is good for you. We need circulation, we need to get oxygen to the brain. It's good for our hearts, it's good for weight management, it's good for diabetes, it's good for Alzheimer's prevention, lowering the risk. But there's more to it than just that. And you had a question?
No, I just had a comment. Everyone knows that I'm a tremendous animal advocate. And for me, rescuing dogs that need to be walked.
Nice.
And my dog and I walk 8 miles every day, 2, 2, 2, and 2. We discuss politics. We discuss climate change. We discuss everything, you know, problems in the family. And he just wags his tail and keeps walking. And so that is my philosophy in life. Just wag your tail and keep walking.
I like it. That's terrific, because you're combining so many things there. You're combining altruism and rescue, great for mood and for the soul. Socializing with your dogs, And walking 8 miles a day is way above the recommended levels, so you are in really way ahead of the curve here. So, is the concept of muscle and strengthening. And the first person who brought this to my attention was my mother, actually, when she turned about 80, and she said she was going to the gym to do a strength training class. And I was like, okay. So, and she was onto something really smart, because what we're finding with muscle movement, any kind of muscle movement, standing up, sitting down, doing that with my arms, is releasing a substance called myokine, which I had not heard about until about July of this year. So I'm very excited about this. So this is a molecule. It's basically a protein or a peptide that gets released by the muscles when they contract. So doing anything physical, walking, petting your dog, brushing your dog, swimming, fantastic. Tai Chi and Qigong, dancing, just walking back and forth on the floor here is releasing substances into our brains, into the body that I'll tell you, I mean, it's crazy what they do. It reduces depression. It protects against Alzheimer's and dementias. It reduces risk of general illness. It reduces inflammation in the body, which we know is sort of a risk factor for many diseases. It releases growth factors in the brain, increases cognition, mood, and it's been described as like hope molecules, bringing joy, literally joy into the brain and the body. And it's like, wow. So, and I think what's great is that obviously more is better. 8 miles is, you're off the charts there. But anything is better than nothing. And I have, quite a few patients who I work with virtually now, and a lot of them work at home virtually, so they're at home all the time. And sometimes just getting up, especially if you're feeling somewhat depressed or anxious, getting up and getting moving and going to the gym or going for a walk can feel very daunting. But what we talk about is just standing up and then sitting down. You've actually done something positive for yourself. Question?
Is there ever a time when it's too much, when you exercise to the point of exhaustion? Is that healthy or is that unhealthy? What is the story on that, overdoing it?
Well, overdoing it is not moderation. So yes, there is the overdoing. I mean, it's hard. I mean, there is such a thing as exercise bulimia, and where that somebody uses exercise so almost aggressively, and it damages themselves. It's too much. It's a sort of compulsive behavior as opposed to joyful movement or self-care. So, if it's, so the rule of thumb is more movement better than no movement, more is better than less. But overdoing it, I think, by the fact that you've described it as overdoing it, I think you've got into the range of probably not as good for you.
What is overdoing it? How do you know when you've overdone?
When you get tired.
Well, yes and no. It's actually it's an interesting question. I mean, the guidelines are from the U.S. government are 150 minutes a week of sort of moderate exercise. Walking, swimming, walking your dog. Sort of getting a bit of a heart rate up, but just generally just moving. So, I mean, the way in psychology we look at a problem, because many things may be problematic for other people, but it doesn't mean it's a problem for you. But the definition of a problem is it getting in the way of your life? Is it impairing your function? So if someone's overdoing exercise, it may be that they're not doing their work, or they're not paying attention to their health in other ways, or they're not connecting with family anymore, or they're alienating people. So when it causes not only impairment, but sort of interferes with relationships and functioning, that's technically a problem then.
This is Michael, not on.
I love to say my own name. It's Michael. So I wanted to reinforce something Susan said, and that is the social aspect of walking animals. Now, we had a woman walking by our house with a huge dog. I think it was, what was it, Marin, a Pyrenees or a Great Dane? Just huge.
Oh, yeah.
So because the dog was so large, we'd yell out to her, "Hey, what kind of dog is that?" And this dog has now become a friend of ours. So the woman makes a point of going past our house, and she says, "Lexi," that's her dog's name, "Lexi wants to see you again." But not only that, I have a little office exactly 1/2 mile away from my house. So I was down in the office the other day, and there's a knock on the door, and it's Lexi, and the woman's coming in. She says, "He knows where your house is,
my
and
God.
he knows where your office is, and he wanted to say hello." And this woman has become a friend of ours because of the dog, see?
That's great. And Lexi's very clever to be able to knock. I'm very impressed.
You spoke about over exercising. I've had off and on situations where I've had to do rehab, and I came out of one situation where I'd had to do rehab. So I was on a walking machine every day, and I would I'm obsessive, so I know that. I didn't know it then, but I did that like for a month, you know, every day. I got plantar fasciitis. How do you say plantars? Yeah. I got that, and it took forever to get rid of it. So I could give you a good testimony. Don't overdo.
Don't overdo it.
Because you'll pay for it some way.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, too, when we talk about exercise and taking care of ourselves, it's very easy to want to just jump in and do things and do a lot of it. And again, rule of thumb is generally, start small, start easy, maybe too easy, and then build up safely. Because once you get hurt, you lose so much. Every day that we're not moving around, I remember the statistics of one day in the hospital lying down in bed, how much muscle atrophy can occur. So better to go nice, slow, easy. Too easy for me, fine. And then the next day you can do a little bit more. Languages, playing the piano, you're way ahead of, this group is way ahead of the curve on so many measures. And yes, learning a new language, learning anything, learning something challenging. Again, you don't even have to be good at it. It doesn't matter. It's the challenging the brain and the repetition and just sort of getting the neurons kind of stimulated. Because not only are you stimulating the neurons and making new pathways, you're creating neurons, and the brain is growing. And this is actually fairly huge in the last few years as well. I mean, when I was in graduate school a while ago, we didn't really know that you could have new neurons. We knew you could make connections and redundancy and all of that for rehab, but we didn't really grasp in a real way the sense that the brain can regrow. And if there's damage, and so this is kind of exciting, because if you think about the brain before was, okay, I mean, again, when I was doing my training, it was psychodynamic training, and Freud was, by the age of 6, your personality is developed, and forget it, it's all downhill from there. And then in adolescent development, we were told, well, by 18, it's over, you're done. Now we know that adolescence, I think almost legally, if not psychologically, extends to at least age 26, and probably more for some of us. And that we are always growing and developing, and the brain can just keep learning new things at any age. And why that's exciting is because even say the exercise program, say you'd never done a day of exercise in your life, of course we've all moved all through our life, but starting something at any age can get the brain creating new neurons. Because anytime we learn something new, the brain is making a connection. So when you leave here today, just listening to what I have to say and what everybody else has to say, you've actually made new neural connections. And so if we were to cut your head off and do an autopsy, your brain would technically be a little heavier. We won't do that because that's disgusting, and I can't believe I even said that. But, you know, that's what they do with the rat studies. They enrich them and then they, you know, sacrifice them, as they say, and the brain is heavier.
Is that where we get the big head thing?
I wonder. That's actually a good question. Never thought of that. Technically, your brain could expand. Yes.
They've got the big head.
Yeah. It's luckily we have a skull to keep everything in. But you know, mental engagement and keeping aware of what's going on, learning new things. You know, especially meaningful activities, because then we get into the social aspect of that and just sort of interest. Again, you could learn something, but if you're not interested in it, what's the point? And you probably won't persevere. I mean, I think a lot of what we're seeing with, you know, good habits is, you know, some people do good things for their bodies because they know they should. You know, you hear about people going to the gym or doing certain activities with absolutely a lack of pleasure attached to it. And, you know, I mean, I'd say good for them. That means they're actually really, really pushing themselves and doing things just because they're good. But what we know from habit formation is when we do things because we enjoy them or we find meaning in it, it's much more stimulating and it's much more motivating. And we keep going because we just want to. Yeah, and just the fact that things make us happy is a good enough reason to do something, you know. So somebody saying, well, you know, it's really better to do high-intensity interval workout training rather than just aerobic or rather than Tai Chi or yoga. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter, probably, if you're a physiologist and you know, a physical trainer for the Olympics. But, you know, for just regular folk, just doing something because we enjoy it is so much more sustainable over the long term. And, excuse me, and then I think what's also nice too about sort of the mental engagement is it, again, dovetails nicely with my last point is social engagement. And obviously you're all here on a Sunday morning engaging with each other. So again, you guys are way ahead of the curve in terms of having interpersonal relationships and spending time with each other. The face-to-face contact is actually very important, not to diminish the virtual contact, which is also helpful. But there is something about the face-to-face stimulation that the brain actually lights up when it sees a human face. And again, the more the brain is lit up and circulation's going, the more things are going on that are positive. You know, there was a big to-do last year when the U.S. Surgeon General came out and said that loneliness was an epidemic. And some people took offense. They said, what's he talking about loneliness for? He should be talking about cigarette smoking or something. But, you know, the loneliness epidemic, which I think the fact it came after COVID was no coincidence, frankly. And, you know, the point that's being made is that reducing loneliness or having social engagement is as important as smoking. That people who are socially isolated or feel lonely can have an actually increased mortality of 50%, which is huge. That's like smoking and drinking and everything else, you know. It's so, and that's even with people. So having that social connection protects people at the same level of, you know, medications and, you know, other actual proven interventions. So it's kind of scary in a way, but also very positive, because that is, again, something that we can actively work to engage with others. Point. Mm-hmm.
I had a question about extrovert versus introvert. You mentioned that you're an extrovert. I think I am as well. But, you know, it seems to me that introverts have much less of a need for that social connection. So is it on a gradated scale based on which you are?
Yeah, because again, COVID did so many things in terms of research, not so much for everybody's mental health, but, you know, there's social isolation and then there's loneliness. And I think we also learned that, you know, you could have social distancing, but it was really physical distancing. You didn't have to be socially isolated. you could be physically 6 feet apart or whatever it was they decided was good for us, but you could still have, interactions and connections with people. So, I mean, loneliness is really a subjective concept, because one person's loneliness is somebody's, too many people around you. So for somebody who's an introvert, they may not need as many social interactions to feel completely engaged and, together with people. And again, we all have both. I mean, we all think we're one thing, but we're really all on a continuum, and we go back and forth. But loneliness is more of a subjective situation.
I have a question for
Sure.
you. I have a relative with Alzheimer's disease, about mid-level, I would say. If it's true that the brain can regenerate, grow new neurons, and so on, why is there no cure for this disease?
That's the question of the ages.
Yeah.
It's a tough. I just had a family member pass away last year from, Alzheimer's. It's an awful illness, and what the research, here's what I can say. What the research so far, especially about the brain, has focused on identifying and sort of documenting disease, especially with something like dementia or Alzheimer's particularly. The new sort of frontier is prevention and sort of maximizing. So I think Alzheimer's is in this in-between stage of, there are new medications, they're not great in terms of, they're not cures, they can help reduce the decline or slow the decline in some cases, but they're not in the curative stage at this point. So all the studies that I've been able to research and they're available are all focused on either prevention or delaying onset, basically, which is the same thing, or slowing the deterioration. So ideally, will we be able to cure it in a certain number of years? I really hope so, for all of our sakes. It's just not there yet. Oh.
A connection between the value of exercise and forestalling the likelihood of the Alzheimer's?
Yeah, the question was, were we talking about forestalling the onset of Alzheimer's or other dementias with exercise? Yes. And again, the studies show, yes, there is. I mean, the goal is always delaying onset. I mean, some people have certain risk factors, and those are we cannot control. Genetics, just biochemistry. We all have our own sort of genetic fate, as it were. But what we show by lifestyle interventions, and innovations are, we can either modify our genetic gifts, or sort of delay an onset of a process that may have occurred 5 years ago. If we can delay it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, not only do we have a better quality of life for those 5 years, but in 5 years, a lot happens in medicine. So every year that you're sort of doing well, you've sort of bought more time in terms of letting medicine catch up with us.
I want to speak to the introverts.
Okay.
On the continuum.
Uh-huh.
I've had, as I said, a lot of health issues. It's been up and down for 30 years now. But I'm finding that my introvertedness has become lessened. And I'm engaging people all over the place. Talked to a guy this morning, 88 years old. He saw my camouflage uniform on that was from a time I was in the Army, and we got in a conversation. And when he left, my blood pressure probably was a lot higher than it usually is. And I had to breathe deep to come down. So it's an interesting phenomenon, and I've got some medical help to see all this.
Yeah.
So I think there's a programming or a model that we have that we bring to who we are, or it develops. And I've been doing a lot more reflective stuff on my medical journey. And I concur with you. We're getting on it. We're getting there now. And I did chaplaincy work because I'm a minister. And one of the first things I learned years and years ago is medicine does not treat the person, it treats the disease. And if you get that mindset, and
Yeah, that's interesting. So, but also it sounds like you have enough self-awareness to know that blood pressure may have raised, and then can do some exercises to bring it down. But your brain also lit up with that interaction and the kind of delight of having something in common with somebody you had never met before. So, yeah, nice example of sort of balancing, challenging yourself, and then soothing yourself, which are skills we all need to be able to do. Well, I think time's running by, but you asked a question about Alzheimer's there. There was an amazing study that came out in July this year, 2024, by, it was an NIH study, but also led by Dean Ornish. You may recognize that name from 45 years of research, prevention. He was, I think, very much focused on cardiac health and low-fat diet. So he's now been working on Alzheimer's, and he did an amazing study, actually, that came out this year, and it tied everything together. I couldn't believe it. It was like a gift. Thank you so much. So what they did was they had a placebo-controlled trial, again, the sort of gold standard of research, where 20-week study, randomized, so people were put in one group or the other, didn't have any choice about it. No drugs, no Alzheimer drugs, no, not even Centrum Silver, nothing. Actually, no, I take that back. They did have supplements, but not medications. They had the whole foods, plant-based diet, moderate exercise, meditation and other yoga-based stress management, support groups and social engagement, and the supplements with the vitamins. And what did they find? They improved cognition and function. I take it back what I just said about there's no cure yet. They improved cognition and function in many patients with mild cognitive impairment and mild Alzheimer's. Yeah. That's what I said when I saw that. So moderate, it's still, we're not there yet. But with mild Alzheimer's, they showed a significant, measurable, objective difference. And so that was I was like, that was a great study. It had everything we're talking about. It had diet, it had the supplements. So they did have a multivitamin, and I actually looked it up. They had vitamin C, they had B12, they had omega-3s, they had coenzyme Q10s. They had all the ones that you hear about. Then they had the moderate exercise was aerobic and strength, so they had strength training. Stress management was the meditation, and I'd like to think a little Tai Chi got thrown in there. 1 hour a day, so that was actually more than the recommended amount. And then they had support groups for partners and the people in the study, a lot. They had 1 hour 3 times a week. So it was a lot of social engagement and attention and interaction. But that was a very dramatic finding, and I think that's probably the first of its kind to show an actual improvement in Alzheimer's symptoms at the early stages. So again, let's hope they continue that study, and then generally in medicine it seems to be that we start mild and then get into the more severe conditions in terms of improvement. So I was delighted to find that and to share that study with you. So basically, to wrap it up for today, and thank you for your attention for this, is, knowledge is power. I think anyone in this room knows it. Awareness and knowledge, it just gives you options to know what decisions you can make. And I think there's something about accepting that we're all getting older, that, we have certain limitations or we have certain challenges, but that's just a fact. And by having information and being able to stay active and to stay engaged and to stay interested and keep learning, we can prevent injuries and hopefully stave off illnesses and prevent getting overwhelmed and feeling like we can't do anything. And we can just, use things that we need to compensate and be realistic, but we can be optimistic. So I encourage you to get out there, walk those dogs, chat with those people, let dogs knock on your door. I don't know how they did that. Teach your grandchildren how to play the piano. Do all these wonderful things, because that's what makes life worth living anyway. So thank you so much, and be in good health.